Okay, picking up on page 236, exploring browser extensions. Some of the background styles you just examined were added to the CSS3 specifications in the last few years. Before that, many of them were extensions to CSS developed and supported by a few browser vendors. Browser extensions that are not part of the official CSS specifications can be identified through the use of a vendor prefix that indicates the browser vendor that created and supports the property. Figure 412 lists the browser extensions you'll encounter in your work on web design. And you can see which browsers they all represent there. Okay, older browser versions might not support the current CSS specifications, but might support one of the browser extensions. In order to support the widest range of browsers and browser versions, you should employ progressive enhancements with the most widely supported CSS2 property, if one exists, listed first, followed by the browser extension, and then the latest CSS3 property. As you encounter this situation in this and future tutorials, you use the following structure. Okay, you can see they'll do the CSS2 property first with the browser, whatever, and then the CSS3 down below. As always, the last property listed and recognized by the browser will be the one applied to the web page. Thus, you always should start with the oldest and most basic standard and finish with the most current. For example, several browsers have their own extensions to specify the origin of a background image. And to ensure the widest possible support for this feature, you would apply the following style properties to the selector. Okay, which has almost every one of the codes, the vendor prefixes for the browsers. Notice that the background origin values differ among browser extensions. Within the Mozilla rendering engine, you set the origin of the background image to the padding box by using the word padding, while the Presto and WebKit extensions employ the same padding box keyword that was later adopted into the CSS3 specs. WebKit, Mozilla, and Presto support similar extensions. Okay, let's move on. Just an FYI there for you on older code. Exploring layout designs. One challenge of web layout is that your document will be viewed on many different devices with different screen resolutions. As shown in figure 413, the most common screen resolution at the time of this writing is 1024 by 768, though the majority of user devices are displaying the web at even higher resolutions than that. Okay, and you can see there. In page design, you're usually more concerned about the available page width than the total screen resolution. Users can scroll vertically down the length of the web page, but it's considered bad design to make them scroll horizontally. Figure 414 breaks down the current data on screen resolution in terms of page width. Okay, and you can see the number in pixels there on the right. Roughly 63% of viewers use the web at a screen width of 1280 pixels or more. On the other end of the scale, about 6% of users have their screen set at less than 1024 pixels. Complicating matters is that as more users access the web through small mobile devices, some users will require page layouts that work with smaller screen widths. Finally, while screen widths represent the maximum space available to users, some space is also taken up with toolbars, sidebar panels, and other browser features. In addition, a user might not even have his or her browser window maximized to fill up the entire screen. Thus, you need a layout strategy to accommodate all of these possible screen and browser window configurations. Fixed, fluid, and elastic layouts. Web page layouts fall into three general categories: fixed, fluid, and elastic. A fixed layout is one in which the size of the web page and the size of the elements within it are set without regard to the screen resolution. A fluid or liquid layout defines the size of the page and its elements as a percentage of the screen width, meaning that a web page and its elements are wider on a wider screen. Okay, you can see there, fixed will be the same no matter what. Fluid, the width will always, if it's 100%, it'll always fill up the width. The advantages and disadvantages of the fixed and fluid approaches are laid out in Figure 416. In general, fixed layouts are easier to set up and maintain, but they're less pleasing to the eye when viewed on wider screens. A fluid layout may be more difficult to set up initially, but it's more adaptable to a market in which users access the web from a variety of devices and screen resolutions. So you can see the pros and cons of each at the top of page 240. And there's a tip. If you're new to web page design, try formatting the initial draft of your page using a fixed layout. Then, once you have a workable page design, you can change it to a fluid or an elastic design. Okay. Many designers use a combination of fixed and fluid page elements and enabling them to have the best of both worlds. Another approach is to use a script that queries each browser about its screen resolution and then adapts the page to that resolution. Finally, some designers propose the use of elastic layouts in which all measurements are expressed relative to the default font size using the M unit. If a user or the designer increases the font size, width, height, and location of all of the other web or page elements, including images, and change to match. Thus, images and text are always sized in proportion with each other. The disadvantage to this approach is that since sizing is based on the font size and not on the screen resolution, there is a danger that if a user sets the default font size large enough, the page will extend beyond the boundaries of the browser window. Element widths and heights are set using the style property width and height, where the value is the width or height using one of the CSS units of measurement or as a percentage of the width or height of the containing element. The width and height measures only apply to the element content, not to the padding space, borders, or margins around the element. Usually you do not set the height value because browsers automatically increase the height of an element to match its content. Although you don't specify an exact width for fluid or elastic layouts, you might want to provide limits on how narrow or wide an element can extend. If an element is very wide, its lines of text might become too long to be easily readable. Likewise, if it's too narrow, its text can also be difficult to read. Rather than allowing these problems to occur, you can specify a minimum or maximum height or width for an element using the style properties min and max. Okay, so let's go. Tip down below says keep your style sheets organized by placing style rules that relate to the same section near one another in the document. Okay, so we're gonna go to the CP styles style sheet. And within the style rule for the body element, we're going to insert the following properties. Okay, right here. You can tell this is fluid because we're using a percent. The smallest, we'll let it go for the width. And the largest we'll let it go. And we'll save it, Control S. And let's go ahead and take a look at the page. Okay, I'm gonna there, it's too small. It's not scrolling because it's a background image. So take a look. Go ahead and take a look at page 242. Written communication, getting the point with layout. Page layout is one of the most important aspects of web design. A well-constructed page layout naturally guides a reader's eyes to the most important information in the page. Use the following principles to help your readers quickly get to the point. Guide the eye. Usability studies have shown that a reader's eye first lands in the top center of the page, then scans to the left and then to the right and down. Arrange your page content so that the most important items are the first items a user sees. Avoid clutter. If a graphic or an icon is not conveying information or making the content easier to read, remove it. Avoid overcrowding. Focus on a few key items that will be easy for readers to locate while scanning the page, and separate these key areas from one another with ample white space. Don't be afraid to move a topic to a different page if it makes the current page easier to scan. Make your information manageable. It's easier for the brain to process information when it's presented in smaller chunks. Break up long, extended paragraphs into smaller paragraphs or bulleted lists. Use a grid. Users find it easier to scan content when page elements are aligned vertically and horizontally. Use a grid to help you line up your elements in a clear and consistent way. Cut down on the noise. If you're thinking about using blinking text or a cute animated icon, don't. The novelty of such features wears off very quickly and distracts users from the valuable content in your page. Always remember that your goal is to convey information to readers, and that an important tool in achieving that is to make it as easy as possible for the readers to find that information. A thoughtfully constructed layout is a great aid to effective communication.